let's get started, and thanks for joining. Let me just start off by introducing the idea here. Path Forward's been around for 21 years now, and as we've done our work and continued to learn from the work we do with our clients, we have taken a more and more, I'll call it comprehensive, systemic, holistic might be a word that you would use, view of how leaders are developed in businesses. And we have, our initial striving was to develop a great leadership development program, which we feel that we did. And it is very experiential, and it's longitudinal, and it's an excellent program. But we are exploring with our clients more and more the cultural, structural element of leadership development to understand how you develop leaders outside the classroom as well as in formal programs. And so today is largely an exploration of kind of those non-structural things, those non-leadership training oriented activities, and a broader discussion of how leadership is developed in your organization. Again, for all of you that have joined us, the chat room's open. I'll try to keep my eyes on the chat room, but Sarah will also be keeping an eye on the chat room for me. And if she believes there's something that has come in the form of a question or a comment, I can respond to it. We'll also have plenty of Q&A time at the end of the webinar as well. So when we look at leadership, we often, I think, especially in the Western world, are inclined to think of it as the person, the characteristics, the qualities of the individual that we hire, their character, their skills. That's certainly part of the equation, but there are many, many other ways that we can encourage leadership development in organizations. And there's many ways that we need to understand how leadership is developed in our organizations, apart from the formal aspects of training and feedback. So let's get going. Most of you know who Path Forward is. Like I said, 21 years in business. I'm a former executive, and our program, largely through Expeditors International, which is a number of people are on the call right now, has reached, I think, 40 countries, and I think we're over 3,000 graduates. It may even be higher than that at this point. I'm a former executive in a Fortune 150 company, so I come from the side of running business. I don't have a formal HR or OD background. I learned a lot of what I learned by doing, and have hopefully become, somewhat of an expert in the process of all those years. We want to decrease suffering in the world by improving the quality of leadership. And we want to do it the right way. We want to help develop leaders in ways that are lasting and impactful, rather than just give a good show or give the appearance of transformation. So next slide, please, Sarah. Certainly the things that I'd say the two primary things that we've learned over the years is that leadership development is the result of a comprehensive strategy. We love coming into your businesses and doing leadership development programs. Much more than that needs to happen. If you have a good partner or partners to help you do the classroom part of that, or if you can do that for yourself, I think that's great. But leadership development takes time. There are no quick fixes. There's no light bulbs, I don't think, that pop off. Maybe a little bit, but learning leadership isn't largely the result of an aha moment or a revelation or the clouds parting and all of a sudden wisdom is bestowed on you. It's something that happens over a long period of time. And at the age of 65, I'm still learning really almost every day something new about the subject. So with that, let's start getting into the fundamentals. I have 9 of them, and just decided at the last minute to add a 10th. So the slide deck will be available to you by virtue of you signing on to this webinar. We're also recording the webinar for you to have a recording of it. And then if you want to pass that recording on to anybody else, please feel free. So number one, sponsorship and engagement from senior leaders is absolutely essential to any leadership development program. You can't tell people how you want them to behave in your organization as leaders and not have the leaders endeavoring to show those qualities themselves. We have somebody on this call who's a very high-ranking executive in a very large company who's been very transparent about his learning process. And that's just enormous. You need more than just lip service or budget approvals. You need the people who are senior members of your organization to live and breathe the teachings of the standards, the norms of leadership in your organization. And they also need to be seen as being held accountable to what they're teaching. So it's not do as I say, not as I do. So as a manager in your company, whether you're in an OD or HR sort of circumstance, you need to try to find a way to professionally hold your senior leaders accountable. And if they stray too far from the company's norms or desired attributes of leadership, there needs to be some way for them to understand the impact that they're having. They also need to show up at leadership training programs. They need to use the language of whatever leadership programs you're using. They need to be familiar with the content. Preferably, they will have been through the program that you ask your leaders to go through. And if they don't, then the accountability around what's taught from a leadership perspective will be lessened significantly in your organization. The worst thing that we can hear when we teach our leadership workshops is for somebody in the workshop to say, well, you know, I know my boss went through this program, but I don't see it, right? I don't see that the person that I report to is acting in concert with what they've been taught. So this idea of sponsorship and engagement is more than just them supporting it from a budget perspective or getting up and giving a rah-rah speech at the beginning of the program. It's really them holding themselves to the same standard as everyone else and demonstrating that what they teach is what they actually mean to happen in the organization. So this is a good place to start, right? If you've got leaders in your organization who think they're already finished their development process, if they think they're already there and they have nothing else to learn, you have to understand that you're going to be limited in the effectiveness of your teaching throughout your organization. The second fundamental of leadership development, you need to understand how adults learn. And adults learn, it's not only adult learning, but it's how emotional development takes place. Adults learn by applying what they've learned as quickly as possible. Leadership learning is circular. It's learn, put it into action, reflect on it, have new experiences, get feedback on those, and then plug back into the circle again and again and again. And so this is why so much money is wasted on leadership development programs that purport to train somebody to be a leader in a week or a 3-day seminar. The people often go to these seminars and have terrific experiences, and they're all singing Kumbaya at the end of the program, but they're not really required to put it into action. This is one of the things we like about our leadership workshop is people are required to put what they've learned into action almost immediately. So understand that adults don't want to learn theoretically, they want to learn practically. They want to be able to take what they've learned and put it into action, because they have a lot to do, they have a lot to accomplish, and they don't want to learn just from an academic perspective. They want to learn something that's useful to them. So having people sit in a classroom and just listen to information being pushed at them is not an effective way for an adult to learn. Also, there are types of things that are learned academically. The technical aspects of somebody's job, for example, might be able to be learned out of a manual or on an online program. Leadership is a rich emotional experience. It's a rich emotional engagement with the organization. And therefore, the way that that's learned is absolutely through experience, through interpersonal contacts, through challenging conversations, through feedback sessions and things like that. So when you want to improve the emotional intelligence of your employees, you can't do it by having them entirely, and to have them do it by reading a book or attending a class in which they're just being given information. It has to be very interactive. It has to require them to do something that's out of their comfort zone and adapt new habits. I was with a group this morning where one of the managers said that one of the most important things he learned from the leadership workshop that he just wrapped up was to put a clock in each of the meeting rooms that was very visible as a message to everybody that the meeting should start and end on time, and also as a way to let them know that he was holding himself accountable for having the meeting end on time and everybody move on. So even something as simple as putting a clock on the wall or changing a small habit is a way of just compiling experience upon experience and trying new things, reflecting on them. Hey, how'd that work? We got a nice impact from that. Let's do that elsewhere in the organization. And again, it's really circular. It's a very almost experimental process, I would say, of trying new approaches with people and seeing how they worked and then getting feedback. So understand how adults learn, and understand how emotional intelligence is learned as opposed to other types of technical knowledge. Fundamental number 3. Now this has become surprisingly important to me over the last few years. You need to develop organizational disciplines around planning, execution, and accountability in your organization. Leaders can only develop in a structure that gives clarity to their efforts and their responsibilities. So what that means is if the organization is not working off of a good plan, if that plan isn't reviewed consistently, if people aren't making specific commitments to complete certain projects or tasks, and they're not being called back in front of their peers or their team to report on progress, then development of leaders will be a lot less effective in your organization. The example I often use, and some of you may have heard me use it, is early in my career, in my early 30s, I took on an executive position. And my boss called all of us in from our various regional operations once a month to come into Seattle for a day-long meeting. And this is back when we had overhead projectors and overhead transparencies. And what each one of us had to do was make an overhead transparency out of the top page of our profit and loss statement as an organization. And we had to put that overhead transparency down on the overhead projector, turn on the light. Everybody could see our numbers. Everybody could see how much money we were making, our top line revenue, our expenses, our profits, et cetera. It was all very visible to all the other people in the room. And we had to give an account of ourselves for what we had said we were going to do last time, whether we were successful in doing that. If your organization does not have a very disciplined, I would argue, monthly plan review, And if people aren't asked to come into, if your leaders current and future aren't asked to come into that gathering and report progress or lack thereof, then you're missing an opportunity to develop the kind of leaders you want, because leadership, because it's largely focused on strategies and long-term initiatives and projects as opposed to just tactical work, requires people who can plan ahead, who can get shared vision put in place with a team of people who don't necessarily report to them, and they need to get done what they say they're going to get done. They need to make specific commitments to specific dates and actions, and then they need to have that progress tracked in a way that they're motivated and productive in getting those things done. So I really would ask all of you to think about how the strategic planning process works in your company. Is the plan clear? Does it lay out responsibilities and ownership? Does it have dates? And is it reviewed regularly in a way that creates accountability, visibility, and requires your managers to get up in an articulate way and talk about the areas of responsibility that they have? So the reason this has become so important to me over the last few years is when people are not held accountable in that way for their behavior, they're much less likely to develop their leadership skills. They can kind of skate by. They can report in things that aren't really progress, like we're working on it. We're giving it our best shot. We simply weren't able. We were too busy to do that this month. They come up with all kinds of soft responses, and the reason they come up with soft responses is because those soft responses are allowed, and the structure of how the organization plans and executes is not disciplined enough for the leaders to learn to manage their affairs in a way that they're productive and effective in getting things done. So, think about that. Think about, are you really accountable, right? Think about your own job, and think about how well the people above you in the organization follow up, frankly, with you about the projects you're working on and the things you're getting accomplished. Fundamental number 4, provide coaching forums for groups of leaders to challenge, support one another. Provide structure for wide-ranging peer-to-peer exchange. Now, most of the managers in your company spend a lot of time together, and they talk a lot. And my question is, what are they talking about? Now, if they're mostly talking about tactical issues, operational issues, that's fine. They need to do that. How often do they get together and are encouraged to speak outside of the tactical space and to talk about things like, how's our culture working? How well are we doing at developing our employees? Is there waste in our organization that we need to address? Interactive coaching forums, they can be facilitated. We can facilitate coaching forums for our clients. We've done it, and it can be very effective to have a third party to keep you on task and keep you out of the tactical realm. But your managers should be sharing the experience of their leadership development with their peers and to some degree with their bosses, and having kind of wide-ranging conversations. How are you doing? What are you working on? What's working for you? What's not working for you? These kinds of open-ended conversations can be not only a tremendous source of learning, but they can be a tremendous source of relational development between those managers. They get to know each other better as individuals. They understand each other's challenges more completely, so they can support each other. So make sure your managers are getting time to interact with each other in open forums. Consider facilitating that using either an inside or outside facilitator, and get people out of the tactical realm and into the relational realm or the strategic realm, or the creative realm for that matter, as often as you can. Fundamental number 5 is adapt your organization's leadership capacity to future growth challenges and opportunities. And I'm gonna make this simple. It's very different to lead a 25-person organization than it is to lead a 250-person organization. In many organizations, people grow in title, in scope, in job responsibilities, mainly as a virtue of the organization growing around them. What we need to do is make sure that we understand the ways that leadership is different at a 25-person level than it is at a 250-person level, and either make the person who's leading that 25-person organization develop into the leader you need in the larger organization, or recognize that that person does not have the leadership skills and talent and orientation to lead a larger organization. And it's different in very many ways. You're communicating now, if you're in the 250-person organization, you're communicating now through a number of different channels. You don't have as much direct relational control or operational control over what people are doing. You have to delegate a lot more. You have to understand communication at a completely different level. You have to be more strategic. There's just a number of different ways that leadership changes. And often organizations will assume that success at the 25-person level predicts success at the 100-person level or the 250-person level. And it doesn't. A person can be very successful managing a small organization and use exactly the same tools and techniques and approaches and be a huge failure in the larger organization. So as the organization grows, make sure that the water isn't just rising and leaders in your organization are taking on broader and broader scope of responsibility without understanding how their job has changed. Really, they have a new job. If they've gone from 25 to 100 people, they have a new job. And in many organizations, that's not really understood. It's not articulated. It's not a situation where the organization sits around and says, okay, how do you need to do your job differently now that the organization is larger than it was before? So it's a way to size leadership around the size of the organization. I know this because I went from 30 people to 150 people from a Friday to a Monday. I was very successful with a 30-person organization. I eventually became successful leading the 150-person organization, but it wasn't without problems because I tried to do the same job the same way. And this is the human tendency, right? If I've been successful, I tell myself a story about why I was successful, and I tend to want to tell that same story over and over and over again. So as the organization is growing around people, make sure that the leaders are growing along with the organization. Fundamental number 6, provide comprehensive and structured support before and after the fact to leaders who have been promoted. The first 3 to 6 months after promotion will largely determine long-term success. Now, there's evidence about new hires that's come out in the last couple of years where we can take an employee at the 90-day period where they've come on board, they've worked for the company for 90 days, and we can sit down with them and evaluate their experience in the first 90 days and make a very accurate and strong prediction about the likelihood of that employee being with the company 3 or 4 years later based on their experience during the first 90 days. I'm just going to take that and transfer that same thought to promotion. The first few months that a person has been promoted are absolutely critical for them establishing themselves appropriately with the organization, for them to start putting new habits, new time management, new communication skills into place, and not just simply doing what they were doing before, just with a broader scope. So I would argue, and again, this is something Path Forward can help with, that there ought to be a fairly formal approach to promotion, preferably before the promotion occurs, to say, okay, in order to get you ready, here's the skills that we want you to learn and hopefully demonstrate, and we'll get to that in a minute, before you're promoted. Likewise, on day one after your promotion, you're going to have a mentor or a coach who's going to check in with you. Again, this can be a third-party coach, or it can be somebody from inside the organization. But you need to pay close attention to what a newly promoted individual is experiencing in the first few months after they take the job. And they need to make mistakes and be supported through those mistakes. They're going to tend to feel overwhelmed. They're going to tend to struggle with some of the relationships that they may have had with people before that were peer relationships, and now they're reporting relationships. There's all kinds of ways that a newly promoted person can benefit significantly from a very close touch coaching or mentoring process, and even to some degree, like graduating them out of that to have maybe 3 to 6 months in to be able to say, hey, okay, this is working. You seem like you have your feet under you. Let's go. I don't know very many companies that do this. I think most companies, again, assume if somebody's operating at a high level, at this level, that we're going to promote them and they're ready. Most people aren't ready for their promotion. They think they are. The organization thinks they are, but in many ways they're not, and they need to be coached. So that's fundamental number 6. Make sure that process of promotion is fully supported through whatever resources you can give that person. Fundamental 7. Assign a future leader's assignments, projects, and challenges above their current level, and then observe their skill and level closely in real time. People need to know what the next level will require of them. This is related to some of the stuff we've already talked about. If you want to know how well somebody's prepared to be a leader, have them start running the team meetings. Have them run the monthly plan review meeting. Have them conduct some research. Have them do a competitive study and competitive analysis. Have them help write the strategic plan or components of the strategic plan. That gives them an opportunity to either choose to step up to the next level or to say, okay, that's not what I'm interested in. That's not what I want to do. And so if you expose people to these higher level activities, they may decide that that's not what they want. But it also gives you a great opportunity to not guess at their future capabilities, but to see them in action before those become actual job requirements for them going forward. So not only that, it gives the employees a sense of engagement and fun, and it brings out some creativity. It asks them to think at a higher level. And even if there isn't an imminent promotion that you're auditioning them for, you're still getting an opportunity to see what people can do. And you can't always give somebody a promotion. That there may not be a promotion available to them in their geography or their department or whatever, but there may be an opportunity for them to make a difference and show leadership without the benefit of a title attached to that leadership. So push people, ask them to do something they've never done before. You'll learn a lot about them. They'll learn a lot about themselves. Fundamental number 8, build structured multi-level feedback processes which explicitly evaluate the leader's adoption of the organization's leadership principles and teachings. So, said very simply, do not teach people to behave in a certain way and then not hold them accountable for their behavior according to those standards. What you do is you weaken the standards, you weaken your development programs, you weaken your training So find a way to say, okay, now we've taught you to communicate, for example, in a better way with your employees. Now we need to see that. We need to get either feedback on how well you're doing that, or we need to observe that firsthand. And so we can kind of check that box. I had an organization many years ago that I did a substantial meetings training for. We put probably 60 of their managers through training on how to conduct effective meetings. And I asked the senior leadership afterwards, I said, okay, so now we need to set up some way of observing the managers as they lead meetings and give them some feedback, see if they learned what they needed to learn and see if they're putting that into action. And the managers said, well, that's not what we do. It's the old lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink concept, which I soundly reject. And they said, we don't want to enforce these rules. We want to encourage them, but we're not going to follow these people around and inspect whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing or not as they run these meetings. I kind of philosophically reject that. If you've trained somebody how to run an effective meeting, then it's on you to understand if they're actually running good meetings. If they're not, they either need to go through the training again, or they need to be informed that the training had a purpose. The training was explicitly to outline the organization's standards and expectations around meetings. And you're now expected, now that you've been trained to run effective meetings, you're expected to run them effectively. And I know it sounds kind of obvious, but I've always been surprised to the degree to which it's not obvious. That we have kind of this elective mentality that, well, we'll train them to be a good communicator. Some of them will drink the Kool-Aid, some of them won't drink the Kool-Aid. Well, if being an excellent communicator is a fundamental requirement of leadership, then that leader should be evaluated, given feedback, potentially by peers in a 360 way. And we can talk about that a little bit later too. Don't train people how to behave and then not hold them accountable for what they've been encouraged and trained to do. So fundamental number 9, hold employees responsible for helping their leaders grow. I think this is a really important principle. Hold employees accountable for raising issues and making suggestions to their boss. In many organizations, the boss is an easy target. And I've talked to many of you about this over the years that I've worked with. The easiest thing for an employee to do is sit and moan about their boss and be unhappy with their boss and be a victim of the boss's behavior or the perceived behavior that the boss is doing or not doing. Employees need to be a partner in their boss's performance and in their boss's development. And so there's ways to let the team know that to some degree, the leader's performance is a function of the team's expectations, the team's encouragement, the team's feedback of the person leading the team. Yes, it can be difficult for an employee to, walk into their office of their boss and give feedback. But I think you should actually hold employees accountable for doing so to a certain degree. So those are nine fundamentals. I'd like to add a 10th that's not on the slide deck. And that would be to encourage leadership experience and growth outside of the company. Encourage your developing leaders to join boards of nonprofits, to volunteer in their community, to perhaps act as mentors to young people in their community, to get involved in school boards, local government, those sorts of things. And I'm on the board of 2 nonprofits. I've learned a tremendous amount about leadership by being on those nonprofit boards. And so I think there's a place for you to ask your employees, your management potential and current management leaders, what are you doing outside of the four walls of our business that's going to help you learn to be a more effective leader? And so, and that creates benefit for the community. It's good PR for your company, for people to see your employees out doing that sort of work. And it gives the person the person who's doing the work, a broader perspective and a sense of the value of their leadership in the broader community, as opposed to just within the business. So those are my 9/10 fundamentals of leadership development. And Sarah, let's go ahead and advance just to talk about a couple things and wrap up, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Let's just go to Q&A. Questions, comments, anything anybody wants to add to those 10 things, anything that I missed that you think is critical? I'll just give you a moment here to maybe get into the chat room and see if there's anything you'd like to weigh in on. Another question I'd like to ask, maybe for you to respond to in the chat room, is of these fundamentals, what do you think would be the most important one for you to focus on in your organization? What's maybe a missing link or two out of these 9 things that you think is not a strength for your company currently? So weigh in on that as well if you care to. Eric says, I like the piece about holding employees accountable for helping leaders develop. I think many of us leaders miss that one. Yeah. I think our natural reaction sometimes is an employee might come into our office and express frustration with their boss. And I think the important thing in those sorts of conversations is to say, okay, your boss isn't here in the room for this conversation. What might change in your approach that maybe change the dynamic with that leader? How well are you showing up as a follower in ways that might make that leader more responsive, more effective, more skilled? So, always remember who you're talking to, and we really shouldn't be talking about people who aren't in the room to give their perspective. We should always be talking to individuals about how their behavior might change or how they might change their strategy in dealing with that person. Any questions that anybody has? Okay, I'll give it about 30 more seconds, and then if we don't have any engagement from you guys, oh, here's one. Jeff, thank you. Jeff Shumway, we need to improve in structured support and feedback, increase training, and be more deliberate in creating core responsibilities. The constant changing target burns people out. Yeah, there's a lot of chaos in companies, and chaos does not produce the right kind of leadership. Chaos tends to produce a kind of a responsive, knee-jerk response from leadership. It can be a lot of good intentions in that. There can be a lot of problem solving. There can be a lot of heroic efforts in a chaotic environment. But when you're when you're allowing a chaotic environment to persist in your organization, you're allowing ineffective forms of leadership to persist in your organization as well. So again, it's back to that planning and execution model. Are we calm? Do we know what our priorities are? Are we communicating those? Are we being specific about time commitments, budgets, expectations, et cetera? So thank you, Jeff. Okay, so how can we help is path forward. Many of you on this call know us quite well. We have our leadership workshop, which we either facilitate or license to our customers. It's a 13-month program. It's pretty terrific. We can help you develop and facilitate group coaching programs, the kind of the forums that we talked about before. We can help you develop leader advisory board programs. So the leader advisory board is a concept that we're pretty excited about. Some of our clients have put it into effect with great results. A leader advisory board is basically taking a traditional 360 review process and putting it out in the open and kind of open source and doing it as a group discussion and feedback session rather than doing anonymous feedback and sending it in through a computer program to actually get people in a room and gather around a leader and give them support, feedback, positive feedback, negative feedback. And so we can help you do that. It's a fairly significant process of maturity for your organization to be able to take anonymous feedback and take it and put it into an open forum. It can be very, very powerful. We can help you develop leadership strategy as you're writing your leadership, your strategic plans for your organization. We can help advise and counsel you on the parts of your plan that might help create a better leadership outcome. And then we can also be those coaches and mentors to people in your organization that are promoting or are due to be promoted. And we can help make that transition far more successful by transitioning that with that person into a position of success. So that's Path Forward. That's what we have to offer in the webinar today. If you like this webinar, please let us know. If you make suggestions about how to make it better next time, we'd appreciate hearing that as well. And we'd also appreciate you passing the word onto your clients, your associates. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do so. And then you get all of our video vlogs and blogs and posts sent to you that way. So thanks to everyone. Terry says, somebody said, can you share when our next webinar is? We don't have anything on the calendar yet, but our schedule is minimally to do these every 2 months, and I'd like to get into a monthly habit. Some of that will depend on some of the feedback we get from you to help us understand how to make these most effective in terms of the format and the subject matter. So give us some feedback so we can continue to do this and continue to get better at it each time we do. John Arbuckle apparently is in the leadership program, the Path Forward leadership program, and is loving the program as it's going forward. So we're really pleased to hear that. So thanks to everyone for joining. Any emails or contacts you'd like to have with me directly, I welcome that. Please send us some feedback. And like I said, if you like what we did, encourage us to do more and get other people on board so we can have more and more of these conversations with a broader range of people. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for your time today. I hope you found it useful, and we'll see you next time.